G'day guys, this is Andrew Price here from blenderguru.com, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create that asteroid field animation which you just saw. Now, believe it or not, this scene is actually really easy to create in Blender. Really super easy. This is going to be a pretty quick tutorial actually. Basically, to create the asteroid, all we're going to be doing is just using a cube. We're going to be getting into some displacement modifiers and subsurf modifiers to create that rock sort of texture and look automatically for us. So it's really easy. We're also going to be getting into a little bit of particle systems for this asteroid field belt here, whatever you want to call it. And also, as well as that, a little bit of compositing as usual. So hopefully going to have a bit of fun. So if you're playing along at home, which I'm hoping that you are, by the way, not just watching. So go ahead and open up Blender now and get a new scene loaded. Now, the default cube that is right here in front of us, this is going to be the asteroid. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and add a subsurf modifier. And we're going to crank up the levels all the way up to 6, the maximum. Okay. I'm going to turn on smooth shading. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is add a displacement modifier. Now, if you've never used a displacement modifier before, basically what that allows you to do is to ripple and sort of change the surface of an object using just a texture. So, for example, I'm going to go here to the texture panel. I'm going to take this default texture here. I'm going to click clouds. And I'm going to crank up the size of the texture a bit. And that will determine how your asteroid will look as well. So just fiddle around with that if you like. And I'm also going to turn up the depth as well, maybe to 10, just to get a little bit more detail in it. Now, if you go back to this displacement modifier here, if we select that texture, then there you go. You can see, and that's the end of the tutorial. Thanks very much for watching. No, there's a little bit more to it, but I mean, it's really, really easy to create this. It's pretty simple. If you want to get a little bit more detail in there, because it's looking a little bit low poly, add another subsurf modifier and place it above the displacement modifier. I'm going to set that to 2, because like I said before, the maximum you can set that to is 6, so I'm adding another one. And yeah, that'll give you a bit more detail, and I might just turn down the strength of that displacement a little bit as well. But yeah, now the good thing about using a displacement modifier is that, yeah, you can go ahead and change the shape of this asteroid very, very easily. And because it's using the displacement, you know, you're not messing around with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of vertices or anything like that. You can just, yeah, fiddle around with these 8 vertices. I had to check how many vertices there were. But yeah, so that is the shape of the asteroid now done. Next thing we're going to do is get into the material. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to this texture panel and uncheck that one, because this is going to be just the displacement, okay? So we don't want that actually to apply to the material. We're only using it in the displacement modifier. Now, for this material, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an image which I downloaded off cgtextures.com. I'll put a link for it if you're watching this on Blender Guru. It'll be right there, but it's called Rock Red 38.2. So there you go, you can check that out. Now, this is a seamless texture, which is very important for what we're going to be doing next. Now, with this texture loaded, first thing you need to do is change it from flat mapping to cube mapping, and that'll make sure that the it's properly wrapped around you know, this cube object here. And the other thing I'm going to do is turn up this repeat value. Because it's a seamless texture, we can have it repeat on itself without it looking too weird. Alright, so let's just have a look at how this looks now when rendered. We haven't set up any proper lighting or anything like that, but just to give us an idea. So it's looking like a mud ball, which is a little bit gross. So we're going to turn off the specularity, like that. And I'm also going to turn on bump mapping for this texture. And that'll just give some really fine detail on the surface of the asteroid, just to get it looking, yeah, a lot nicer. When it renders, we check it out. Yeah, there you go. So it's looking a lot nicer already. And also I might, while I'm here, I'm just going to turn down the saturation 1 notch, just so that it's not too crazy. Alright, cool. We've set that up. That's ready to go. Alright, so moving on to the lighting now. I'm going to take this default lamp. I'm going to turn it into a sun lamp. And position it about there. Now, this is space we're working in, so it doesn't really matter which way the sunlight comes from. Because, yeah, it's one of the few times we can get away with just throwing the sunlight whatever which way we want. Which is kind of cool. I'm setting the energy to 1.5. Let's just give it a slightly yellow value. That's pretty cool. And I'm also going to position the camera side on just by hitting Control-Alt-0. There we go. Alright, now let's have a look at this rendered now. So just using a pretty basic lighting setup with the sun. Okay, so there you go, looking okay. Now one problem is that when we make this background black, you'll notice that we won't be able to see that edge of the meteor anymore because, you know, the background is going to be black and yeah, that edge there is going to be black as well. Now the reason for that is because, of course, we've just got one lamp, one sun lamp, and there's no bounce lighting in space, as somebody pointed out to me on Twitter. So technically there shouldn't really be any lighting from the outside. But, as you can see, that looks a bit weird. So, it's that time where you need to use some artistic license and get a little bit creative. So let's just imagine that there's a big meteor field all around it. Asteroid field, whatever you want to call it. And the sunlight is bouncing off some asteroids that are close to it. So let's just assume that. And go ahead and turn on environment lighting. I'm going to set this to a low value of a 0.03, and that should cast some very, very subtle kind of bounce lighting just from, well, surrounding the entire object basically, but it'll just mean that it just sort of pulls it away from the background a bit better, and yeah, so that's looking pretty good. So we can go ahead now and move on to the asteroid field. So basically, I just want to create like a few kind of like little chips, like little rubble, little bits of rock that are sort of floating around in the atmosphere as well. Now, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and hand create those, just sort of like place them around, you know, like that, and just position them. And but obviously, I wanted to make an animation for mine, and I didn't want to have to animate each one of those little rocks just for this project. So I got a little bit creative and figured I could do it with a particle system. So I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. Now this plane, I'm going to start there and sweep across the scene and drop particles as it goes. And that's just a really simple way just to get particles into the scene. So with that plane now selected, if I just move this stuff around, I'm going to add a new particle system. And I'm going to set the end frame for the particles to 20. So basically, all the particles are going to be emitted by frame 20. I'm now going to go down to field weights, turn off gravity. Okay, so that's what it's produced. I'm going to set the lifetime to 250. So it gets that result. Now, with it, the plane now sitting behind the camera, where it is right there, I'm going to hit yep, and then select lock scale, which is short for location and scale. So it's going to create a keyframe for the location and the scale at frame 1. Now if we jump to frame 20, I'm going to position this way past the asteroid, and I'm going to scale it upwards to about there. And now I'm going to hit I again and hit lock scale. So now if we go back to frame 1 and animate it, you should see that happen. So we've now very quickly just got asteroids, not asteroids, little particles appearing everywhere. The reason I made it scale is that I want to create, I want to have asteroids in frame, and I found that with, the plane being the same size, like really huge, starting back here, there wasn't enough particles near the camera. So that's why it's, scaling upwards as it goes. So there you go. Now, to get those particles to become asteroids, there's a very, very quick way to do that. I'm going to take our main asteroid here. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to move it to frame 2. Now I'm going to just move some of these vertices around so it's not exactly like the original. And I'm now going to duplicate it again. And I'm going to do the same thing. Twist things around a little bit. Move that there. Duplicate it again. Again. And if I wanted to be really fancy, I could turn on random editing fall off. Just to move stuff around. So as you can see, it's just a really quick way to create variations of an object. Especially when you're using just a displacement modifier. Just allows you to really quickly just fiddle around with things. And yeah, I think that should probably be about it after this. And scale inwards. Okay, so we've got some, yeah, randomized types of asteroids. So what I'm going to do with all of these, I probably should have done this before. I'm going to set their subsurf to level 3 for all of them. Yeah, it would have been better if I'd done that before I duplicated it, of course, but I forgot to. So just bear with me while I do this. Last 2, delete. The reason I'm turning down the subsurf, by the way, is that these are, yeah, they're not going to be that clear to the camera because we're going to be using depth of field. So there, they can get away with less detail. Okay, now I'm going to select all of these asteroids right here, and I'm going to hit Control G. Okay, now what that's done is it's created a group and it's added all of those objects to it. And if you press T, then you can create a name for it. I'm going to call that roids. Go back to layer 1, select the particle system, all the way down in the render section, change it from halo to group, and then select roids. And there you go. Each of those particles are now one of those asteroids. And if you click pick random, then it just selects one of those types of asteroids just randomly, which is cool. Awesome. The other thing we're going to do is uncheck emitter because we don't want this plane to actually show up in the render. It's only creating particles. We don't want it to do anything else. Now the other thing, which you may have noticed, is that the particles are A, all the same size, and B, they're all sort of on the same rotation. So we're going to fix that in the particle settings here. If you go to rotation, I'm going to change the random amount to 2. I'm going to set the random for that and dynamic. And the other thing I'm going to do is underneath physics, I'm going to turn the randomized size all the way up to 1. So you get completely randomized size particles. And I'm also going to turn the particles down to size 0.03. So now you should see this effect. These little particles floating around. That one's hit directly on the camera, which is just great. So I can maybe change the seed a little bit so it's not going through the camera. There you go. Awesome. So we've got the particle system set up. All of those things should be in play. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render now and see how this looks with all those little mini asteroids surrounding it. Of course, it does take up a little bit more render time. Okay, cool. So it's looking pretty good. Now what I want to do is put in the background. I want to put in some stars, okay? Now there's a very easy way to do that in Blender because there is a star feature. There you go. Now using the stars is a little bit fiddly, however. It does take a little bit of, just to get the sort of desired result you want. Generally the stars are way too big for what you need, so you do have to fiddle around with it a bit. I'm just moving to a blank layer just so I can see how the stars look with these settings. Problem is you don't want stars that size really, but then you try and turn down this size amount and then you lose half the stars, so it's sort of a little bit fiddling around. And I usually just create my own star field in Photoshop because you have a lot more control, but there you go. Alright, so the star field is now set up. The other thing I want to do is create sort of like a sort of an atmospheric fog or like a Milky Way in the background. Like, you know, you see like a sort of a spacey art project and they've always got that kind of, nice thing in the background. So to create that, what I'm going to do is jump to layer 3. And I'm going to add a UV sphere. Alright. And you'll notice that this is now overlapping the entire scene. So the camera and the asteroid are inside the sphere. And if you know anything about Blender, you'll know that the normals by default are, of course, pointing outwards. Those little blue spikes there. So we need them to flip inwards because the camera is going to be inside the object. So doing that. And I'm also going to turn on smooth shading. Okay, so we've got a sphere set up. So what I'm going to do is add a new material. Turn off specularity. Turn on transparency. And turn it all the way down. And I'm going to turn off traceable. And now I'm going to go to the texture panel. Now what I'm going to do is use this cloud texture right here. Make it affect the alpha value. And you can see what it's doing there. The sphere itself is transparent, but it's using just this texture to create those sort of solid alpha values. So I might just turn down that alpha there, like that, just so it's a little bit softer. And I'm going to turn down the brightness as well, because we don't want it to completely show through. The other thing is I don't want it to be pink either, obviously. It's pretty good. And I might turn up the size and the depth. Like so. Alright, so let's have a look. Okay, so that's just that. I'm also going to turn on an emit value of 0.1. And there you go. So that's a very quick way just to get just some really light kind of, yeah, Milky Way happening in the background. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's looking pretty good. Make it a different color. You can experiment as much as you like. Maybe try hard as well. No, hard doesn't look good. Okay, there you go. I'll leave that up to you. Alright. The other thing I need to do, I don't want this sun lamp here to affect this this UV sphere. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move it to layer 1 and 2 because it needs to affect these rocks here as well. And I'm going to check this layer only. So now it's only going to affect these 2 layers and not the sphere. Pretty simple. Cool. Alright, so everything is now pretty much set up and ready to go. The only thing left to do is set up the depth of field for the camera before I do its render. So having a look at this, I'm going to select limits and then drag the distance to about there. Alright, now go ahead and hit render and then we can get into the compositing, finally. So, quickest way to get to the compositor, control left arrow like I just did then. Okay. Get the backdrop happening. Cool. Alright, so things that I want to achieve using the compositor. We want to get sort of like a soft glow around these asteroids here. We want to apply some depth of field. We also want to sort of maybe sharpen those textures a little bit. Maybe give a little bit of a glare effect coming off that rock face there. Maybe do a little bit of chromatic aberration, a little bit of lens distortion, a vignette, and maybe color correction. Okay, so quite a few things. A lot of it's really optional. I mean, you can see the result already looks fairly decent, so don't need to go too overboard, I think. Now, to get a sort of glow just around that main sort of rock there, what I need to do first of all is just cut down on the lightness to about here. Alright, so that's pretty good. I'm now going to get a fast Gaussian blur on just that area. Maybe turn it up to 20. No, maybe 50. 50 is better. Like so. And then I'm going to grab a mix node. Place that there. Like so. So that's going to give us, you can see just a really light glow around that area. And you can turn that down or up depending on what you like. And yeah, one other thing I might attempt is to put a glare node in. Don't use glare nodes that much, especially for this kind of thing, but I don't know, it might look cool. So let's try this. I'm going to turn that mix up, this down. Okay. Alright, that's going to look probably pretty weird, but oh well, let's just check it out. Actually, I don't even think I used this for my final render, but you know, it's worth trying, I suppose. Set that to add 1, and then viewer. Okay, so that's, yeah, it's sort of a space agey Star Trek type of overblown lens flare type of a thing. So yeah, that's looking okay. Okay, next thing, what are we gonna add? Oh yes, we need to add the depth of field first of all, before any of that probably. So drop that in there, set that there. Let's have a look. And I might set this to 20. Yeah, that's way too much. Maybe 40. Problem is when these things get really close to the camera, you can see that awful kind of artifacts around the outside. And I suppose we could maybe hide it with some preview effect render. It's not really working. But yeah, I mean that's just a fact of using the defocus node in Blender. But that's okay. Okay, cool. Next thing I'm going to do is add a let's see, chromatic average goes last after that one. Let's add a vignette, distort, lens distortion, and that'll just sort of pull the image closer to the center, like darken the edges a bit, and yeah, make the viewer focus on the center more. So of course, this is the method I always use for setting up a vignette. Like so, viewer. Cool. And then a mix node, setting this to multiply, as usual. Multiply. And that just takes the darker parts of that black and white sort of mask. Okay, so you can see it's just really lightly just darkened the edges there. Not very obvious, but oh well. The other thing I'm going to do now is add a color balance node. And this is optional, but I just found for my final image, just to, I suppose, add a little bit of, I don't know, variation to it, make it look a little bit more interesting, just to make those midtones a little bit more bluer, sort of give it more of a like a sci-fi type look. Can kind of help a little bit. Don't want to go overboard, of course, but that looks okay. And finally, I'm going to add, of course, to be completely cliche, some chromatic aberration. Normally, I don't think it fits, but in this case, I think it does. But not that much. That's extreme. Let's go 0.04, something like that. Yeah, something like that is fine. And I might turn up the distortion as well. Yeah, make it look like it was a photograph from a space shuttle or something. I don't know. That looks pretty good. Awesome. One other thing you might want to do, because the texture on that rock is looking just a little bit dull, I'm going to add a filter node. I'm just going to drop it right in here. And I'm going to set it to sharpen and to 0.01. And that should, yeah, that should just sharpen the textures a little bit, just make it a little bit more clearer. But there you go. That concludes this tutorial. I hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys had a little bit of fun watching. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. As usual, as I always end the tutorial, I'm interested in seeing what you guys make. So if you make something cool, drop it in the comments below. Very interested if you create an animation as well. So yeah, upload it to YouTube, Vimeo, something like that. And post that, put some sci-fi, spacey music in it or something. And yeah, as always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.